reads. Not sure why that's funny. My name is Mac McFarland. I am the director of the Center for Contemporary Art and Culture here at PNCA. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Go Cubs on this amazing evening. For Cauleen Smith's presentation as part of her time here with us at PNCA, for the opening of her exhibition, which the official opening is tomorrow. And if you come out tomorrow, you'll get this lovely little publication that will be hot off the presses. So definitely do come back. If you didn't have a chance to experience the exhibition this evening when you were here, it will, of course, be open tomorrow and then open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. until January 7th. So you have a little time, but don't miss it. It won't be open after the lecture, I'm sorry. These things all happen because there's a lot of people who work really hard. It's not the artist, it's not me, it's not Ashley Gibson, the assistant director of the center, who also did a lot of work. It's a whole lot of people. And I just really want to thank some of them tonight. The lecture in Cauleen's visit is co-presented by the MFA in Visual Studies program here at PNCA. So I'd like to thank Peter Saminsky, who is actually in Japan at a residency exhibition, so he couldn't join us this evening. But I really do want to thank him. Cauleen will be visiting, I think, about 8 studios during the time she's here. I think she's done one of those already. The other people that I would like to thank are the Regional Arts and Cultural Council here in Portland. We received a project grant from them to support this exhibition. If you're not aware of RAC and their project grants as artists, I would definitely check that out. As students, you can't apply, but there are some things you can apply for. So I would definitely look into those, such as the Portland Buildings project space. You can get $500 to do an installation in that building as a student. Check those things out. C3 Initiative, they were so awesome, and they housed Cauleen for us for her site visit back in March. Yeah, that was, I was trying to think of the date. I think it was March. And that was really amazing. And really, you know, like site visits are really what make these projects happen. So thank you so much to C3 for that help. The Herb Alpert Award and Romy Crawford, who did an interview with Cauleen after she won this amazing award. And they have allowed us to print the interview in the publication, which is really awesome because it's a great lengthy interview that really digs into Cauleen and her thinking. So that'll be up for grabs. And Carolyn Lazard, who wrote an essay for the catalog as well. The other people I would like to thank are David Ruse. David is probably a very unknown individual to you all. He is one of the designers here at PNCA. He designs all sorts of things, but he really got into Cauleen's work and has made a kind of look and feel for the publication and some of the other advertising that we did that was amazing, and I just really would love to thank him for that work. Diana, who was here all day yesterday, all day Monday in the gallery with us doing the install. And actually everybody who's here working this week on the installs. You know, we don't just have Cauleen's show opening tomorrow, we also have another exhibition opening tomorrow titled Hidden Assembly, Labor Through the Lens of Contemporary Art, curated by Yael Amir at New Space Center for Photography. It's a joint exhibition that we're doing with New Space. Yael had curated this exhibition for Space Gallery in Cleveland, and now it's here in Portland. So we have the PNCA opening tomorrow night, and then the New Space opening on Friday night. So please check out both of those. We've had Mary Lum here all week working on her install, and it's been really great to get to meet Mary and have her around. I'm just going to give a brief introduction about Cauleen, and then going to welcome Melanie Stevens to the stage to do a formal introduction. But I just want to say that Cauleen's work, and I say this in my intro in the catalog, has really haunted me for a long time now, like actually longer than I actually want to admit. I mean, it's really like was in screenings in the Bay Area when I was living down there, when I would see her work at spaces like Artist Television Access. And they were always these things that stuck out to me. And then it was the same with her installation work, such as in 2011 at Gallery 400 or in 2013 at the Yerba Buena Center. And the works really called to me. Like, they were just like, hey, come over here. Like, they like beckoned me. And I think that the work that you'll experience in the 511 gallery as well, it really longs for a viewer to be in it. And you'll sort of see what I mean by that. So it was really those things that made me write this cold email to Cauleen one day, where I just sort of presented myself to her as an interested party. And if you're ever wondering on how these things come about, sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's a cold call. And, things happen through those. So don't be afraid to reach out to the people that you're interested in. The people whose work you see, reach out to them. Like, it's meaningful to them. So that's really, and then keep an eye out for your emails, because we're going to be doing a screening of Cauleen's film and videos. And you probably might not know this. I'm sure Melanie's going to cover it, but she is an extensive filmmaker as well. So without further ado, I would like to bring Melanie Stevens to the stage for the formal introductions. Thank you all so much.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the PNCA Visiting Artist Lecture Series. Tonight, I have the immense privilege and honor of introducing Cauleen Smith, an exceptionally versatile interdisciplinary artist and filmmaker who stretches the realms of imagination by exploring the connections between history, culture, and phenomenology. Smith's work employs the dense discourse of experimental film and challenges the viewer with rich visual narratives that draw from Afrofuturism, structuralism, and philosophy. Her work embodies the fantastical celebration of a shared identity through whimsy, cinema, and speculative narrative. Cauleen Smith's opus, which includes everything from films to objects and installations, has been featured in group exhibitions at the Studio Museum of Harlem, Houston Contemporary Art Museum, Yerba Buena Center for Arts, the New Museum, and D21 Liepzig and in Berlin, among others. She has also had solo shows at The Kitchen, the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, and Threewalls Chicago. Her film, Dry Longzo, won Best Feature Award from Urban World Film Festival, the Pan-African Film Festival in Los Angeles, and was selected for American Spectrum of Sundance Film Festival. Smith has been the recipient of numerous accolades, including the Creative Audio Archive Research Award, Experimental Sound Studio Residency, a National Alliance for Media Arts and Culture Artist Award, a Washington Park Arts Incubator Award, Arts and Public Life Residency, the Rockefeller Media Arts Award, and a Robert Rauschenberg Residency. She has been an assistant professor at the University of Texas in Austin and acting associate professor at the University of California in San Diego, as well as a visiting artist at the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. She currently lives in Chicago while teaching at the Vermont College of Fine Art Low Residency MFA program. Please join me in welcoming Cauleen Smith.
Hi, thanks so much for those lovely introductions, and I have thank yous to do as well. I really want to thank Mac for that cold email. It was actually, I knew who Mac McFarlane was, and so I was really delighted to hear from him. And I really want to thank Sher for letting me live at the C3 initiative, because that visit was crucial to what's in the gallery, what you'll see. I really want to thank Diana, who's not here, for seeing me through this very challenging installation along with Mac. And there are so many other people who are like floating around that I would get their names wrong and embarrass everybody. So I'll just leave it at that and say thanks. Also, thanks for coming. You all obviously dislike baseball, and I don't hold that against you, even though I'm rooting for the Cubs naturally. So I'm gonna get right into this, and I just heard Max like remind me that I'm gonna be doing a screening, or there's gonna be a screening of my work. My plan was to show you a lot of films, so I'm gonna be skipping through stuff, which is dangerous because it means that I'll just start making stuff up. So, so Mac, yeah, I want at 45 minutes just say Cauleen, stop talking. So bear with me, you guys, while I try to get through these slides. I thought maybe we could have a conversation about the kind of work I've been doing and looking at it under a rubric of tactics and mediums and how those things are determined based on appropriate forms for the ideas circulating and the desired habitat for the work or where it will live once it's finished. I'm going to jump around chronologically, but hopefully it'll kind of become clear over time how things are connected. And I want to just alert everyone that some of the videos I'm going to show are like embedded in the PowerPoint, so they're kind of even grainier and low resolution than what I normally present, which can be pretty grainy. So this image you're looking at is like the first iteration or experiment of what has sort of exploded in the gallery across the hall. The image that you're looking at on this side is a projection that is running through the little tiny camera, CCTV camera on the tripod there, that's looking at an arrangement of three things. A plant, like a little mini landscape, and an African figurine, and a video playing on a Sony Trinitron, which then make the image that you can contemplate on the wall. This piece was called Space Station Little Instruments, and it's not really an installation, it's not really a sculpture, these are not really films, but they're trying to encourage a kind of curiosity in the spectator and allow the spectator to determine what's happening. And developing the work, I was thinking about improvisation. And it's something I'm still thinking about. And part of my ongoing quest with my own work is to generate production procedures that create the space for improvisational construction of moving images as well as installations. Something that is interacted, well-crafted, spontaneous, with an interplay between the recorder and the recorded. I'm also dedicated to historical excavations and speculations that, oh, thank you, that's good, thank you, that loosen our assumptions of what we know and encourage us to embrace the instability of knowledge rather than the certainty it broadly offers. This is another look at the arrangement objects, and you'll see this system coming across the hall in a really much more bombastic way. Moving images in this work function like a codec. So I'm collecting images that are part of something I'm thinking of as an origin myth, and they kind of contain, in my mind, a source code for the origins of a future, a past, a future past. The objects function as speculative artifacts, and the CCT camera, as Nam June Paik taught us with his seminal piece TV Buddha, which was also an improvised piece, by the way, pulls us through an infinity loop of perception and dissection of what we first see and then what the space allows us to understand we are really seeing. Do you guys all know the TV Buddha piece? Yeah, more or less? Okay, so, because I don't have that slide, and I'm sorry. I'm just going to play some raw images without sound here, because I'm going to read to you for a minute these ideas so that I don't botch them too badly. No doubt everyone can relate to the idea that each time I make something, it's not so much an act of mastery, but an inquiry and a cogitation. And I'm not making, I'm sorry, things are going crazy over here. I'm not making the thing because it needs to be learned, or because I know. I'm not making the thing because I know something. I'm making it because I don't know something and I want to learn what is possible. Frequently, the thing that needs to be learned emerges through failure or something like that. And something so tentative and fragile that it won't survive the scrutiny of an audience, that happens a lot. I'm directing this talk to the students here in a kind of sympathy and in league with the position that they are in, which is I understand academia is to simultaneously perform the mastery of a subject while also positioning oneself as an apprentice to those who have been designated as the true masters of the subject. It's tricky being a student. It's tricky being a teacher. And it made me reflect on the process of learning. So every time I enter into a new institution, I start thinking about how different institutions and what their pedagogies are. So this film that I'm showing you right now is a boot camp film that I made in film school. I didn't go to art school. I went to film school at UCLA, and they make you make a film, and it's like being in it's like they literally call it boot camp because they're sort of drilling this certain kind of training into you, into your body, into your like practice, into the way you do everything. I love the images and the ideas that circulate around attempting to recuperate the urgency of portraiture, and an homage to James Van Der Zee, who was a Harlem Renaissance, just a humble studio portrait photographer who made some stunning images and created a document of an era and a place. But at the time that I was making this film, my focus was directed towards creating a work that could live in theatrical spaces and sufficiently generate some kind of legibility for people who hold the keys of those spaces. And I knew as I edited it that everything of interest to me in the film was not really served by a linear theatrical reception through a script, through dialogue. And yet that's what I was making, well, that's what I was being taught to make. The ideas in the film were trapped in this form that could not support them. But now I'm returning to these images and thinking about portraiture again, and thinking about installation and the potential of the portrait studio space to contain speculative selves. So now, 22 years later, this material, I can't even believe I wrote that there. This material might find its habitat, its proper form, and it may even be able to remain in celluloid form, which is rare for me these days. Here's another little clip. I'm going to end this early.
All right, I'll be right back. You know, Polaroids are really cool. I bet you like Lorna Simpson. Who? Lorna Simpson. She takes those Polaroids. They're like 2 feet wide. It's amazing. Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you when Jefferson since that guy Jefferson. That was his name. No, I hadn't seen it. Did you see?
Okay, I'm just gonna. I would have played it longer, but that's a feature film I made. Like I was still in film school when I made it, and it just cracks me up, that particular scene, because I was looking at art so intently while I was in film school. It should have been a hint that I was in the wrong school. Like I'm writing dialogue about my favorite artists, and I'm like, you know what I mean? I watch that every time. I'm like, really, Cauleen, you are clueless. So anyway, here's a flyer I made while I was living in Austin, Texas, which is actually kind of similar to Portland, Oregon, in that it's a really, really white city. And therefore, if you're trying to find black subjects, you have to kind of hunt, because they may not be in abundance, and they may not be readily available, and they may not even be in the spaces that you've been kind of like imported into the city to fill, like academia. It was such a polar opposite kind of environment to shooting in Oakland, California, where all we had to do was set up on a corner and the whole neighborhood could just become the film. So I needed to sort of like create a community, and so this film is literally like I just put this all over the town and then waited to see what happened, and it was hilarious because all of these completely random black people, when we never saw each other in the city because we're so scattered, showed up to be in a film shoot that started at 6 p.m. and ended at 4 a.m. And I was like, why are you here? They're like, I just wanted to see who would show up. Everyone was just like, I just wanted to see who would show up. And we had the best time. We had so much fun. Anyway, so I'm going to show you some clips from this film because this film is kind of like a lesson in the ways in which the kind of like practices of filmmaking, if I deployed them with a certain kind of intention, I could actually create and build community through the process of making something. Let's see. Is that gonna? Okay. Let's see. I can show you that one because it's actually, these are really, really tight little loops that really don't have a beginning, middle, or end. And there are a series of 6 of them, and they were installed very site specifically in this home. And so one of the other videos was projected onto the front windows of the house. And there's this, you see the female figure there, there's a male figure in the other window, and they're throwing these bean bags back and forth. Anyway, okay, so another thing I learned from shooting dry long so was the way in which on-location filmmaking is kind of an act of colonization. There is a domination of space, and there is an extraction of resources. There is an exploitation of labor, the building of just enough infrastructure to get what one needs, but not enough to make it usable once you leave. And by the time I made the film that I'll show you now, I'd long ago left behind sort of the indie film world and the experimental film community, and I was pretty firmly entrenched in contemporary art. And in that world, there's a lot of discussion about this thing called social practice, which is artists basically taking over public space, what I would even maybe call sometimes colonizing public space, with the desire to create interactions that generate content. And I'm not putting a value on that, though I think that the word, I'm using the word colonize because it is a loaded and charged word, but I'm interested in the work that comes out of this practice. And the tactics of this kind of work seem identical to low budget filmmaking. The main difference being that in the art world, the side of content was just what the filmmaker had to do in the indie world to get a shot. So like on a film shoot in the morning, you might have to, like, I don't know, slip this very noisy inebriated man $20, and you might have to listen to an elderly woman tell you some stories about the bad people in the neighborhood for 20 minutes that makes your shoot 20 minutes late, and then you can get your shot. But in contemporary art, that exchange of the $20 and that exchange of the story become a work. I was puzzled by that for a long time. And then I started to sort of like think about the way that filmmakers are always telling anecdotes. Like when you go to a film screening, what a filmmaker does is they tell you the war stories. And that is this other kind of work that isn't visible on the screen, that is really, really kind of why the filmmaker is there. It's like what you love about making the film that never even makes it to the screen. So that started to make sense to me. So what if the collision of filmmaking and live performance in everyday life could create some kind of new thought form? That's kind of what I thought maybe is going on in social practice, or maybe could go on for me. And without talking all day long about this piece that I'm going to offer, I have like all these questions about, as a filmmaker, while I'm making things, about kind of the ethics of what I'm doing. Even just the act of taking up space, sometimes I'm not sure about, or if I'm really ambivalent about it, then I just sort of take on the role of the colonizer. I just try to inhabit that space and then accept the consequences. So I'm going to show you this film. I have to duck out of PowerPoint to do it. The music that you're going to hear in this film is Sun Ra's seminal tune, Space is the Place. Are you guys all familiar with Sun Ra? If you're not, just YouTube and have fun. Let's see. Let's get this going. I'm just going to show you a bit of this because if we do screen films, I'll probably play this one so I don't ruin it. But it's relevant to what I'm trying to talk to you guys about. So. Okay. All right. So you get the idea. That was a major invasion of a South Side high school marching band into Chicago's Chinatown. Let's see what happens if I do this. Are we back? Okay, we're back. That video was part of a very long investigation of the period of time that the American composer Sun Ra spent in Chicago. I'd been a longtime fan of Sun Ra in a rather superficial way, like most people who love Sun Ra. I just thought he was cool. He declared he was from Saturn. I mean, he has this amazing movie that I love because I'm a sci-fi geek. But I had no idea that he actually became Sun Ra in Chicago. There was a 15-year period before anybody really knew about him where he became this person and developed this cosmology and created all the tactics and forms that he used to make his work. He did that in Chicago, and that really got my attention because his cosmology was so complete. So I spent a lot of time. There's some ephemera and audio recordings that are left behind that belonged to Sun Ra and his business partner Alton Abraham up from the period that they lived in Chicago and worked in Chicago. And those archives are in Chicago. So I went there 2 summers in a row to be in those archives and just figure out what was there. And I found myself kind of like apprenticing myself to him. So I realized that, Sun Ra actually screen printed his own record albums. I'm going to make a record and I'm going to screen print it. I don't know how to screen print. I don't know how to make a record. So I'm like doing all kinds of things that I'm like, just the procedures. And like, I'm trying to use his procedures to rethink how to make films, which is something I'm still doing. Anyway, so this installation is a really boring picture. Sorry, I'll move on. This installation sort of culminated at the beginning of that research, and I'm now showing you this really awkward object. And I'm going to talk a lot about awkward objects because there's a room full of them over there, along with beautiful objects too, none of which I had anything to do with making. I just borrowed them. But I started trying to take the things that I learned about how Sun Ra made work, how he worked with others, how he invented, and I tried to make my own kinds of systems. Which came out really awkward but also really transparent. So what you're looking at here is a device. I call these I call them devices. They're not really video projections and they're not really sculpture. But this device, it's what it's supposed to do is play a video and it's supposed to make a rainbow. So you see that really pathetic little rainbow in the corner? That was my rainbow. It was better in a darker room, but fights with museums can be really intense, and I lost this fight for darkness. So, the rainbow is something that figures into Sun Ra's cosmology quite a bit, as do mirrors and vortexes and the idea of infinity. So I built this mirror maze, and then I asked people to I went to visit the installation one day, and I noticed that people were spending a lot of time in there taking pictures of themselves, so I just asked the museum to ask people to text me their pictures once they took them. So people just started texting me their portraits. This is one of my favorites because she figured it out. She figured it out. A lot of people just kind of like took a picture of themselves in the mirror. I was like, thank you. That's okay. Thank you. But she actually figured it out. Anyway. So you would move through this. First, you would encounter the awkward object, the rainbow maker, and then you would move through that mirror vortex, and then you would get to the videos, and you can see a very blurry image of the film that you just saw. There were 14 films that played, and that film was the last one. That's another image of the video installation. This piece is called Remote Viewing, and I'm ambivalent. Like, this could be something I show you guys later. But I'll talk here. Okay, anyway. Again, ideas of occupation and evacuation are on my mind when I made this piece. This is something I made right before I made the installation that I just tracked you through with the rainbow and the mirror vortex. And this was kind of provoked by that NPR StoryCorps program. And it's like it was my alarm clock, and I was listening to this while trying to sleep and started dreaming this story about a boy, a grown man remembering being a boy in South Carolina, and the Negro schoolhouse that his mother was responsible for. He watched it get demolished, but it wasn't just demolished, it was buried underground. And I couldn't understand like why you would need to bury a structure underground, why you wouldn't just remove it or even burn it. There's a lot of things you can do with a building. Burying an entire structure seemed crazy. At the time I just started teaching at UC San Diego, everybody's really into land art, all those Smithson books had come out. So it was Smithson, Heiser, on and on and on. I had to check those guys out just to have conversations with my students, and I was confused because it's the 70s, there's an ecological movement going on, and meanwhile, these dematerialized artists are out in the desert with sticks of dynamite, digging giant trenches and having absolutely no regard for their environment. And I was actually puzzled by it. I was actually confused about the narrative that I was receiving in art history versus how I understood it looking at the history and the activity from a non-art historical perspective. And I was trying to fuse them and understand like the form of what they were doing. I really understood. But then I'm listening to this radio show about people burying houses underground. I'm thinking about Smithson, and anyway, this is what happened. I can't show you the whole thing. And I'm not sure I can fast forward because this is embedded. But you can guess what's going to happen, right? I'll just talk while this is on. The process of making this is shot on the UC San Diego campus. Very fortunate that there was the Great Depression happened in 2008 when I got there, so all this construction was frozen. And when you build big buildings, you kind of like deed your land over to the contractor and they insure it, and the land belongs to them until the building is built. And so the contractor is just sitting there in his mobile home waiting for the University of California to give him the money to build the building, and he's on hold. He's got a whole crew of people waiting. And so eventually I figured out that that's what was going on with him, and I talked to him. I was like, hey, what do you think about digging a 20-foot hole and letting me film it? And he was like, I got nothing better to do, and my guys need work. And so it's really difficult to dig a 20-foot hole. We tried doing it on other people's private property, but you will hit all kinds of things underground. It's really, really hard. Really hard to dig a hole that deep. And 20 feet doesn't sound like a lot, but it is really deep. So this was amazing because the land's already surveyed. They already know what's underneath there. That machine had been sitting there idle for a month already. And so that's Norberto, the operator, who is a show-off. I have like all of this like footage of Norberto like twirling the thing around, and the arm would go like woo. He was really, really intensely skilled with this machine and really enjoyed being filmed. So anyway, this goes on for a while. It's actually really difficult to dig a hole and really difficult to bury a building, which made the story about destroying the schoolhouse even more disturbing. And then after we did this was like a reenactment. I had to question reenactments and think about them and what are they for and what are they always about? And you never reenact good things, right? You don't reenact your 6th birthday party or that one Halloween party that was actually awesome. It's like the things you reenact are always traumas. And that's what we did here. And then when you reenacted a trauma, you reinscribe it onto whoever is around to witness it. And that's what we did here. And that's what this video does. So I don't know. I thought maybe I wouldn't do that anymore. This is another video that I'm not going to show you. But it was a companion video to, okay, I'm already talking about it, sorry. A companion video to the house video, and this is a Smithson work and another kind of oral history narrative kind of fused together again. Smithson made these grids at the same time that he made that, the collapsed house piece on Kent State campus, the partially buried shed piece. There it is. Same time he made that piece, he made these just very exquisite, perfect string grids all over the campus. And so we thought we would make one in California under this beautiful tree. But there are a lot of rules, and this is Malibu State Park, about how you can treat the land. Now there are. This was like, you've probably seen this tree in a lot of television, like MASH and whatnot, because it's a movie star. This used to be the Fox lot where they shot all their westerns and TV shows. and this tree is about 150 years old. So now the park takes care of this land and refuses to let you do anything to harm it. So we couldn't make a grid that was perfect. Everything that we made was subject to nature. So this became this amazing exercise in futility, and it kind of feedbacks back onto what it would take to make these perfect formal structures in the land that were being made some 40 or 50 years ago. This is what the installation looked like at the kitchen. That's where I made it for. So when I'm like trying to work through how to make a film, I'll make storyboards, and I kind of let them. There's the very literal storyboards that I use to communicate to the crew, but before I get to that, there's usually these just drawings that are just about visual language that is important that I need in the film. And this bar of Ivory Soap creeped into these storyboard drawings, and then they kind of took over and became these other things. And I shouldn't show you this. I like this film, and I will show this to you later. But it's a film made with Ivory Soap. I'll just show you a little bit. I'm going to keep doing that. I can see. So Ivory Soap, I had to, dig in and find out what is this? It floats, it's super white. And it actually, all the things that you think might be embedded in the lore of Ivory Soap are very deliberately embedded in it. And that made it even more fascinating to me. And people carve it as a hobby anyway. It's really easy to carve. It's made out of animal fat. And so I started carving an alphabet that I use to write these poems. So that's enough. You get the idea. But then the storyboards just leaked into other stuff. These drawings. This is Anthropology. That women's clothing store there. One particular catalog they had really upset me. This was on the cover. It's like this little girl. She's like 13, and she's just walking into the ocean in her panties. And I was just like, that's not okay. That's just not, no. I just couldn't. So I started painting over the little girls in this catalog. Wait, did I have something to say about that? No, that's all I have to say. Okay. Here's another, and actually all these films, these 16 millimeter Supergranny films, I make them really quickly. Like I may not think of the idea quickly, I may ruminate, but then once I decide to make it, they happen within a couple of hours, or that one took time because it's sort of animated, so overnight, but they happen in one go. So this is one I made in Chicago, and I probably won't show this one to you guys, so I'll show it. This is an empty lot in Chicago that's across from this brand new arts incubator started by another artist you may have heard of named Theaster Gates. So this lot is now paved over really nicely, and Theaster's taken it over as well. But the first year, it was like this, you can see what it is, like so many lots in this neighborhood. They turn into prairie in the summer. And I just found them beautiful. But, when you live in a neighborhood that's being completely neglected, you don't see this as beautiful with good reason. But I'm from California in the suburbs, and I realized that these empty lots are actually prairie. Like this is actual wild prairie in the middle of the city. And I just was enthralled. I would just watch over the course of the summer, just watch things like grow and erupt, and I was just enthralled by them. This woman moving, that's Taisha Paget. She's a fairly renowned choreographer based in LA, doing a lot of amazing stuff. So I asked her to play with these semaphores for me. And that little boy is Malik, who would hang out in my studio, which was across the street. So he comes home from school, and it's just Malik. So he starts giving Thai suggestions, but I thought my camera was out of film. Like I thought that I was pretending to film because I loved what Malik and Ty were doing, and I knew he was doing it for the camera. But then when I got the film back, through the malfunction you can see in the camera, that's what I got. And I was like, what a gift. And then this film kind of was teaching me about improvisation again, because it was like, I was like, Ty, do you have 4 hours Friday afternoon? She's like, yes. It's like, I'm coming to get you. Okay. And then she comes, she puts on the boots, she gets the flag, she goes out there, I'm running around with the camera. People are driving by on the street like, can I be in your movie? Malik comes, I run out of film, my camera breaks, all this stuff goes on, and I really thought it was a wash. I just sent it to the, and this is what happened. And actually, I was like not even disturbed about the fact that I thought that the film was gonna be a disaster, because I had learned so much about how to make a film that day, in terms of like, just, we have 4 hours, we have these elements, let's make it happen. And it's like, next time I'll get a better camera. But it ended up being this really lovely gift. So I'm not going to show you this film. I'm not going to show you that. Not going to show you that. I can't even talk about this stuff. How do I talk? Or maybe I should ask, how do I talk about this? So this image of this is Mike Brown's mom from Ferguson. Maybe a day or so after her son was murdered by the police in Ferguson. And I love this picture. It's just so tender. You see what a young mom she is, and you see this man caring for her. I just thought it was, like, I love this picture. I don't know who took it. It's just on the web. And I saved it before I bothered to get a credit. So now I think I need some help with that Google picture thing to track it down. And I was commissioned to do a film that I'll show you when we show the film. It's called Crow Requiem by Lightwork, our urban video project in Syracuse. And I decided to go to Syracuse in December. And the only thing really going on in the town were crows. Like I don't know. I've never actually seen this much wildlife ever. Like, there are just thousands of crows, and they would inhabit the trees, and you would think that the trees had leaves, but they didn't. They just had crows. That's how many crows, everywhere from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and then from sunset until dark. They were just beautiful. And I started to think about, and then everyone started telling me, oh yeah, it's totally okay to shoot crows because they're a nuisance and they're terrible and they're scary. And I was thinking about how, like, why would it be okay to shoot crows? And why would it be okay to shoot Michael Brown? And then, Jim Crow. There's a lot of ways in which the crow is a receptacle for everything evil that we dread, in the same way that black bodies are. So it became a metaphor that I started to use. And then I was also, I love horror films from the 80s, and The Fog by John Carpenter. It's one of my favorites. And you can see that's the box cover for The Fog, and that's an image from Ferguson. So that was obviously obvious what I'm going to do there. And then this is a portrait I started to make of this character that I created. That'll be in a film that you'll see. So that's the end of the talk. Is that premature? Is that okay? Is that too much? Is that not enough? Thank you. Maybe we can just have questions. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, and there's a question I want to ask you, your comment, is how do you break away from the linearity of like filmmaking, and like how you get away from that dark room where you sit with your talk?
Yeah. The main thing is that like you have to kind of find another way to invite the viewer to look at your images and really tell them right away that that you're not going to be spoon feeding them the information, that there's something to see and that they have to meet it halfway. And I found that by making installation, even just by putting videos in one room but making people go through a mirror vortex to get to them, that even that disorientation was enough for viewers to understand that they were implicated in the images that were on the screen, and there was a kind of feedback loop going on between the viewer and the screen. And then what happens there is that you don't have to tell all the story because we already know the stories. We already know the linear stories. So it's all about what we don't know, right? It's all about what happens when this image and this image collide and what you know about that collision, as opposed to me telling you, there's a bomb, and then telling you, there was a bomb. Did you see that bomb? Like, that's the way narrative works, right? Where it tells you over and over again what's happening in case you missed it the first time, as opposed to just creating the space for you to be like, what just happened? Or like, what did I just experience? What did I just feel? What did I just think? What did I just learn? You know what I mean? I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
Hi, there was a bit of free-form resistance in black cinema back in the 70s where they weren't being welcomed and accepted into the studio system.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, today, when there's so much more communication via social media between people of color, do you see a reemergence of how are we making, you know, new iconographies or new languages for us that we're sharing within our networks? And how does this fit in? How does your practice fit into that?
I don't deal with commercial cinema at all. I mean, I tried, and the reason that I wanted to make movies is because I wanted to change them, and then it became clear to me that most people like movies exactly how they are. They don't want them changed. So I moved on to something else. So there's a movie out right now called Moonlight. I heard that it's a wonderful film. It's not necessarily changing any language or anything. It's simply recentering the person that we care for, the person we identify in the film, which is what filmmakers were trying to do in the 70s, in the 30s, and in the teens. It's, I think the difference is now, I don't think it has anything to do with social networks. So, oh wait, no, that's not true. Social networks are the thing that allow me to know about a film like Moonlight, whereas even 8 years ago, it would have taken me a year to hear about a film like Moonlight, right? But the biggest change is that there are some serious players in media right now, and they're doing whatever they want to do because they're making more money than God. That would be Bay and Jay and Anna DuVernay and Oprah and many people who, you know, you can think what you want about them, but they're facilitating incredible movement within industries that have been shut down before they got the power that they have. So that's what I think about that. I have nothing to do with it. I want no part of it, except for the money. I want the money. Any other question? Okay. Oh.
I'm still thinking about what you were talking about earlier with spaces, and you were saying it seemed like no matter what you were seeing, like these sort of visions and spaces is like sort of like colonialism.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you think about like resistance movements or something that are in those spaces, or people that are trying to liken their experience in that space to something like that. Like, do you still equate that with
I mean, kind of. You may not be talking about something like Occupy Wall Street, but is that kind of what you're talking about?
Sure, yeah, maybe
I don't think that protest works on the same way as film production. I think protest, its goal is to interrupt and disrupt and undermine and stop and be a wrench, right? And film production, that's not its goal. It just does that in the process of getting what it needs. You know what I mean? So I don't think those things are really at odds. They're really different objectives. I mean, I guess you could use a film shoot as a form of protest, or maybe sometimes, depending on where a film shoot is, it could be a form of protest, but that would be kind of romantic. Really, if you're making a film, you're just trying to get a shot. You're trying to get your shots for the day, you know? Yes?
You're talking about space a lot, and I noticed how excited you got when you realized that the vacant lot in Chicago would become a prairie. And I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit more about what excited you about that?
Probably a lot of things that have to do with my own childhood that I started to remember as I started to walk around in these empty lots. But I mean, there's a lot of conversation in Chicago about what to do with the empty lots and who gets to have them and what'll happen when gentrification comes, et cetera, et cetera. And people are actually afraid of the empty lots. They talk about if the grass gets too high, people will hide dead bodies in them. There's all this like urban, I was like, when's the last time that happened? And there was like, I don't know, but it happens, okay? I'm like, I don't think that happens. But I mean, there's a lot of conversation about what to do with them, and now they have to be mowed, and then we just want, there's not enough housing in that area, so there needs to be housing. What kind of housing will it be? Who will it be for? But these are neighborhoods that have, it appears as if they don't have any resources and that they don't have any wealth. But to me, a gigantic lot that's growing wild sunflowers and red clover and gosh, what else did I find? Like little onion thingies, like Edelweiss. There's goldenrod. So many different. That's wealth, and I was interested in thistles. Like I was just interested in looking at what we had, as opposed to looking at it as a lack. Like looking at it as an asset. It may not be, the most lucrative asset, but it is in this moment, if we care for it, an asset. No one agrees with me on that. I would make these really huge ikebana flower arrangements, and everyone would just be like, that is the ugliest thing I've ever seen. It was just an attempt to shift where the value will lie in things. Yeah.
I just wanted to, is it me? Sorry. Hi. I wanted to talk about the colonizing idea. That was really provocative for me, and in its relationship with the set and the mobility of the set and that kind of temporary colony. Just in my personal head, I grew up in Los Angeles, and that city is constantly in that kind of mobile colonizing of different places all over the city because of Hollywood. And I'm just curious how that relates now that there's these implications through social practice. Are you saying that the artist has a different role than the filmmaker, or a different relationship as the colonizer than the filmmaker? Can you expand upon
I think it's the same
Yeah.
relationship. I just think for me, it was important to just accept that and then think about, is there any potential in this occupation? So when we shot the film Dry Long So, I moved from LA, I was in film school, up to Oakland for the summer, but I didn't have a place to live. I lived in this empty house that we bartered from a family that had abandoned it. In exchange for the house, they wanted a water heater installed, and that is all. And then I said, I need to paint the house pink. They said, we hate pink, so you have to paint it back to gray, because our neighbors will hate it too. And this was the deal. So I moved into the house, but I have so little money that there's everything happens in this house. So we are taking over the block. We need electricity in the middle of the night. We knock on the neighbors' doors and ask them if we can run power out of their houses. We're taking all the time. Now, what I noticed in the art world is that kind of taking then becomes look what I did. Look what I made. Where it's tell me, people go around and tell me your story. And then they take the story and then they put it in different contexts, and then they made something. But I was I just need a shot. I wouldn't ask for this if I didn't need this shot. And I'm not gonna think about it once I get the shot. I'm just gonna try and get another shot. So I was just dealing with the ethical relationship between what it means to ask people for something and then what you use it for. And I was noticing, as an advisor in grad school, a lot of social practice artists would go and ask people for stuff and then bring it back and say, look what I got. And then I was yeah, but I just was when you extract resources, it's usually to do something with it. You know what I mean? Would you frack if you didn't need it to go in your car? Or would you? I mean, would you bother? I mean, but in contemporary art, it's the extraction itself that is what is found to be fruitful. So I was just thinking about that. I was like intrigued with it because I frequently agreed that it was fruitful, like the asking and the giving and the exchange. Sometimes not. Sometimes I just thought it's just taking. But that's the practice, right? The practice is about an ethical exchange. Like, can there be an exchange? And to me, it's really fruitful when there is some kind of exchange, or when that extraction then turns into something else. Like, that was what I came out of. I'm not trying to sort of accuse people who do social practice and go and ask people for stuff and then bring it in the gallery. Like, I'm not accusing you of anything because I'm interested in that work. I'm just saying, for me, I was much more interested in the ethical tensions of like what's possible when you do that. When you ask for something, like, are you like, no one has to give you anything. No one has to do that. So when they do, they're either gifting it to you or they want something. And in film making, they usually want something. So I was really already accustomed to the exchange and expecting it. And then I was like, oh, I kind of miss that. I kind of like it when there's a trade. Like, I like getting the house in exchange for the water heater. I like that. Does that make sense? No, it isn't. But the way in which we occupied the space and we didn't trade for everything. Yeah, we took power, we took people, we took time, we took up a whole block, we kept people up. What else? I mean, I can just go on and on and on and on and on about what we took in order to make this movie.
So if you're acknowledging your role as a colonizer is not much different than other types of colonization, what are you doing to change that relationship?
Nothing. Just talking about it. It's obviously making people really uncomfortable just to think about what we do and how we do it. And I think that the thinking about it is what I'm trying to do. And then I changed the way I make my work. I'm really, really, I think about, in like filming, I think about these things. But this is like a totally imperfect situation. Like being someone who makes stuff means that you need resources. Like, you are a consumer of resources. Artists are the best consumers, which is why I think we should never have to pay taxes, because we just spend and spend and spend. You know what I mean? But we also take and take and take. So, I mean, this is not about piety. This is about thinking about ethics.
To totally switch gears, you mentioned how improvisation is important, and like kind of the happy accidents with Malik stopping by and there being film and the camera malfunctioning. And as students, I feel like, especially within the context of critique, we're always like supposed to defend every choice as like super deliberate. And I was wondering if you had any sort of advice on how to like, I guess, speak about those happy accidents and those improvisations.
Well, I don't think of improvisation as an accident.
Okay.
Improvisation, I'm looking at improvisation through the practice of experimental music. And when you listen to improvised music, what you're listening to is complete and total mastery. You're listening to someone who has a relationship with their instrument that is so profoundly refined and deep that they can respond to what they hear and create in the moment a structure within which we can understand what's being made. To me, there's no accident there. It takes practice and it's difficult. So I think these are like competing ideas about what improvisation is, and the way we use it in our sort of casual means it's about making do or just sticking things together and like taping it and letting it go. But I think of it, I'm really, really like referring to creative musicians and like, you know, people who have like such a profound comprehension of what they're doing that they can do it in time without like a planned structure. So, I mean, and that's why I keep talking about making improvised films and I keep failing at doing it because I'm just not good enough yet. Yeah.
Is there a last question?
Yes. Molly.
I love what you said, how we never reenact good things. And I'm curious if you think that reenacting whatever's drawing us to reenact bad things? Or is it somehow like a less activated realm? Or if it's something you're interested in?
That could be great. I mean, it didn't even occur to me to make a reenactment of something good, because it's just not what we do. It's like counterintuitive, right? It could be really great. What would you reenact that was good? Like,
That's a great question.
I'm trying to think of something. I think joy is interesting because it works differently than trauma, in terms even like I think neurologically it doesn't work the same way. So you don't. It's really difficult. Like when you get really good news, it's really difficult to relive that moment. When you get that good news, it like diminishes, but trauma doesn't. It even grows stronger, right? It's just a different neurological function, and maybe that's why it's difficult. I think it's a good idea. Try it. Thanks.